There's a chill in the air, but it's always warm and cozy here on Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With us today, again, a distinguished panel, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany, Rabbi Emerita Gaylia Rooks, the Temple. Joining us by phone today, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, and Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. We'll get started. Topping today's discussion is the latest report to show Kentucky kids aren't where they should be in school. It shows less than half of the students read at grade level, and an even bigger number cannot solve math questions their teachers think they should know. Assessment results are worrisome, with some critics saying all the blame is not on the schools, but families who are not making reading at home a priority. So we turn to our panel on Moral Side of the News. And panel, what are the answers? What's the answer here?
I think personally, this is Clay Calloway speaking by phone. I think the answer is motivation. Motivation. If you have motivation, you can achieve just about anything. I shared earlier about a statistic of the reading rate, literacy rate of slaves, of ex-slaves coming out of slavery, was at 5%. And by 1915, that was at 1865, it was at 5%. By 1915, that literacy rate has ascended, skyrocketed to 75%. So no one was poor, no one was more deprived than ex-slaves coming out of slavery. So what was the ingredient that created such a skyrocketing rate of literacy? It was motivation. In fact, that motivation was so high, there had never been a literacy rate as high and as rapid as that in American history. And because it was so high for these ex-slaves, that it spawned public education in the South for white students, because the literacy rate had already exceeded the literacy rate of white students in the South. So the rate of private education for Black ex-slaves is what challenged and created the need and the justification for public education for white students in the South. So motivation, despite deprivation. If you have motivation, you can overcome just about anything in education.
Well, no one can argue with that, Clay. I think that it's more than motivation, though, because times have changed so much. That sense of just the passionate hunger for the written word, for education, for equality, for being able to do something that was always forbidden. As that waned, with generations after the enslaved population, there are now other things that are tugging on our students, and the disparity between wealthy and poor communities in our public schools. It doesn't take a PhD to figure that out. And a lot of it has to do also with race, no question. And I don't know how we can increase the motivation. Well, I have some theories, but we won't get into those. But I guarantee you, if you pay your teachers more so that better people want to become teachers, better qualified, more passionate about it. A lot of people don't become teachers because they can't afford it. They would love to, but then they have to hold down 3 jobs. And that doesn't even count that the teachers are paying for half the school supplies and things like that in a lot of schools. I have many friends who are teachers and they don't get the support that they need. I have a friend who's a special ed teacher, and he doesn't even have the staff legally required for him. And I think that more teachers and better teachers would better motivate our students, help them believe that the way out of poverty is through education. Right now, selling drugs, being in a gang, this, that, and the other. That's a way out of poverty. It's not a good way, but I think that we need to find ways and means of inspiring these students and providing for them in a way that we just aren't doing.
Well, I concur with you, Gaylia, in the sense of agreeing with Clay as well, motivation, but yes, beyond that, I've always been an advocate for education as high as you can go, as fast as you go, whatever it may be. The more educated one becomes, and I'm just talking about getting degrees, I have a lot of initials behind my name, doesn't mean I'm smart, but you're tuned into what's happening in the world more, and it gives you more input into your own life and being a good member of the community. Looking at all the data they'll throw at us in regards to this report, back to JCPS, it seems to me we roll it, yes, racism is part of it, yes, but it's also, to me, it comes down to the haves and have not. It's money, as you mentioned. It's funding. Whether the schools who are well funded seem to be doing rather well, that are not well funded, I mean, their grades are not as high as the others, no matter what race they might be. So to me, it's funding, yes, and it's one thing for us to do a lot of talking, especially in the political season, about this, that, and the other, and money. But look what happens from the Washington, D.C. area every time we put money forward to ease some burden of the community. There's always a flashback on that. But money to me is, I mean, the funding is the important aspect. It gets us better teachers, yes. You think your teachers are not being paid enough. The teachers in our Catholic school society are making between 15 and 20% less than what they're making on a public school system. So for our folks, it's a sense of ministry, it's a sense of sacrifice. But that can be asked of everyone, and even our own folks sometimes can't make it because of the low pay that we can give them. So I think if we really funded not just teachers, but first providers, I mean, all these folks who really truly protect and support the community at large need our support financially as well as others emotionally, et cetera. But to me, it's funding. And I think if the Jefferson County public school system could attain more funding in some form or fashion, and then orchestrate it, then that's when the negotiation begins, how you orchestrate it to fit the schools that are not funded as well as some of the other schools. That's a different discussion, as it were. It's part of the whole problem, though, as it were. So me, I look at it and I say it's funding to me.
And not only the schools that get more money, but schools in wealthier districts, the families are able to step in and, oh, we need we want to go on this educational field trip, and, or we'll raise money. We'll, I don't know if they still have PTAs, but I know that, in the schools that my kids went to, we're selling plants and we're doing car washes, and we're, for special, we were able to raise more money. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have to talk about what Crusade for Children does, but I'm sorry, Harriet.
No, it's a rich conversation. The two things that came to mind in reading this article and thinking about past conversations that moral side panels have had around education and test scores is that are the tests written in a way that helps students do their best. In the past, they were written from a white male perspective. How has that shifted? And if it hasn't shifted, why has it not shifted? So that when students take this test, they're already going in able to succeed better. And secondly, I just find it so unjust that schools in the same town get different amounts of money in which to do the important work of education in the world for these students. And until that changes, we're just going to keep running this mouse on the wheel, talking about the needs in education. It's an unjust system right now, and it should be one of the most just systems that we offer to the generations coming up.
Maybe perhaps, I'm sorry, Clay, you want to say? Go ahead.
No, I was about just to chime in, Clay Calloway on the phone again. The scripture does say, to your point, Father Tony, money does answer with all things in one way or another. That may be an oversimplification, but the scripture suggests that in Ecclesiastes, money does affect and answer all things in one way or another. And it was a historical point in Alabama how money and the lack of money can affect education. In Alabama, up to 1950s, they'd allocate only 30 cents per Black student in Alabama, up to like 1950, compared to $15 per white student in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where my pastor's family is from. So when you put 30 cents compared to $15, you can only imagine what the outcome will be when you have resources that's been allocated towards education. So just that alone would be a good place to start and end the conversation, in my opinion. Let's start there. If we get equity there, then we probably can get equity in so many other areas as well.
Well, my hope is this whole conversation, the whole report will generate interest among the populace, parents especially, and those who don't have kiddos in the school system, but they'll be tend more to support public education, private education, whatever it might be, education, to get our people, their youngsters, they're the future of our society. They're our future. So we can't leave them out there, just know what 2 + 2 is, what's going on, to make the world better for them and for us as well. I want someone to take care of me as an old person here. So.
Well, you know, it's the however many cents you said it was compared to 5 cents to $15 or 30 cents compared to $15. It's an investment. Literally, it's money that you put in and you see the results. One of my big concerns, I mean, this has been going on. I've lived here for over 30 years. My children went through CARA and all the rest of that. And I know different things have been tried, the Kentucky Education Reform Act, CARA. And as a teacher in our religious school at the temple, I could see, I said this once before on air, we had this fabulous program about the Holocaust that the 6th graders were doing. I think it was called Decisions. Computers were new, the kids were really turned on to it. It was the best thing I've ever seen in Holocaust education. Fast forward, not 5 years, but maybe 3 years. We literally had to stop using this program because the kids were not trained to think critically at all. And they didn't understand. What's the answer, Rabbi? What's the answer? And I'm like, well, what, let's talk about, no, there's a right and a wrong. They just want to know the answers. They want to be able to pass the test, which, we don't have tests, but you understand what I'm saying? We don't teach kids how to think. Okay, my other point was, and I don't need to go on about this, but I do have a fear that people are going to say, oh, it's the pandemic. And no one argues that the pandemic is making a huge difference. You just look at the statistics of kids who are already in high school when the pandemic hit and already had some learning skills and things like that, compared to the younger kids who, homeschooling and didn't get the support they needed and didn't have the technology, what have you. And I know that makes a difference, but this was a problem way before the world heard of COVID.
Right.
All right.
But when it's like the COVID was the new tsunami, and when the waves went back, we were left with the realities that we were already living in. Right. But they're spotlighted more because we're now all living in that aftermath in a different way.
In New York City, I know this because my grandson lives in New York City, and he's just turned 3, and they have this 3K preschool is funded by the city. That means every child starting at the age of 3 is going to be able to be in preschool, not just childcare, which is, sometimes substandard, sometimes it's a family, especially when I think about immigrant families, that the kids are, with the sister-in-law or the aunt or the grandmother or the mother, some other kid's mother, whatever, and they end up not speaking English in their daycare setting because, that's not the immigrant's native language. And while I want those kids to have strong language of their country of origin or their family's country of origin, they have to learn English also. So when you have free public starting at 3 years old, I would bet money that that's a great investment that will pay off for New York. I'm just so impressed with that program.
All right, panel, we're about halfway through this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thanks to our viewers and listeners. We'll go on to our second topic now. We know there is a huge need for affordable housing. Back in the news is a renewed plan to build just such an apartment complex near Prospect, Kentucky. The nearly 200-unit project is being met with huge opposition by neighbors, including John Evans, the mayor of Prospect, a community that many would call wealthy. In a public meeting this week, about 100 gathered armed with a petition against the apartment complex, calling it monstrosity and very large. So turning to our panel, is this a case of not in my backyard in Prospect?
Sounds like it. Again, needed housing, as the population of our country ages more. I'm part of the baby boomer routine, and most of the baby boomers now, we're edging up for the new generation to come in. They're beginning to retire. But a lot of single dwellings, then spouses die, families are left to whatever. The individuals are left by themselves. They need some place that they can have as a housing. Even we in our clergy in our diocese have just opened up a new retirement center for our fellows here. We need someone to kind of watch over us, take care of us, how you want to say it. But affordable housing, especially for those who are still together as families, need it as well. Is this a NIMBY, as you say, not in my backyard? It certainly sounds like that, because again, I'm from the Lake Forest area over here, and they're fighting on. There's another. It's not housing, but it's a cement construction company. They don't want that in our neighborhood over here. So there's arguments about that as well. But there's certainly a need for housing in the Louisville area, especially for the seniors. And again, if it's going to be in the Prospect area, let's leave it up to the people, but certainly people have a right to object to it. But at the same time, the need is there. We need to, if not in Prospect, where, not just moving it somewhere less affluent, but let's take care of our people as best we can.
And that would include giving them transit, making sure, because part of the dilemma is it doesn't always, from what I'm understanding, is that public transit is not readily available or as available. Right. And there is a concern about parking. There is a concern about infrastructure. There is a concern about overall well-being, not only for those who have moved into that area in the structure, but for those who are already there. So it sounds like this domino effect. And the other wondering I have is, where is I'm not sure really how to word this, friends, but they talk about it being a monstrosity and being huge and all of that. Do we really want to stack people on top of each other? How does that honor their need for housing? What if it were more comfortable or not 10 stories high? And I don't know if you're understanding what I'm trying to say, but there's something about the dignity of giving people housing that really feels like home.
Right, but if you can't go, I was going to say, if you can't go out, the only option is to go up.
Right.
So
and just to put a thing on it, I don't think they're talking about 10 stories. My understanding is that the original plan was 4 or 5 stories, and now they're talking about 3 or 4 stories. So I don't think does anyone know if that's true or not? Because that's what's in my head.
You're in the ballpark, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not talking about that huge a monstrosity, which certainly would stick out like a sore thumb in Prospect. Mm-hmm. And to your other point, Harriet, I'm a believer. If you build it, they will come. That's the thing about public transportation has been used as an excuse for not allowing this beforehand. In response to the not in my backyards peoples. I think that is an excuse. And I think that there are residents in Prospect who already would appreciate more public transportation, more sidewalks, more infrastructure. And if we put in public housing there or low cost, whether it's senior housing or what have you, I think that's the hard part. Let's find homes for these people and then extend the bus route. I mean, that's
But how quickly will those needs be met? That's where I'm coming. I'm not trying to use it as an excuse.
I know you aren't. I think
don't leave people hanging
Mhm.
when they get the opportunity to live in affordable, solid housing, but yet the rest of their lives, they can't, the pieces are still too far strung to put together to make living comfortable. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, if I may just weigh in, Rook, this is Clay Calloway on the phone again. With respect to public housing, I had my brother, he was a retired manager of Beach Terrace. My first cousin was a retired manager of the Dosker Manor, which is I think it's the very last high-rise public housing that exists probably in the state of Kentucky. But the trend across the country has been to tear down the high-rise public housing and create a more, I guess, domestic, no more than two-story high replacements. There has been a deficit of public housing in the city since they destroyed the Beach Terraces of the world and the Iroquois of the world here in Louisville. So, but what my question would be, why Prospect? I mean, what's the real appeal, advantage of Prospect? We got a lot of lots here, like at 18th and Broadway, when they didn't build the Walmart, didn't build the Passport facility. That's sitting there vacant. Make it easily accommodate public housing there. Since it's close to bus lines, close to other services. I don't know the real advantage of Prospect versus so many other possibilities within Jefferson County that could really serve that purpose. I get the have and have not.
I think this is a case of both and not either or.
All right. And with respect to if you build I'll retire from MSD. If you build a sewer anywhere in the country, in the county, believe me, development will come. So if they got sewers out there, they have the infrastructure to accommodate this development in some way. So I think it's probably more than most of us can really speak to with great detail about the project. But just on its face, I see some questions about why they're not so much not my backyard concern, but it seems like it could be better served the constituents if it would probably consider in other locations. So that's my input.
Good points. Good points.
Okay, panel, we've got about 5 minutes left. I got a third topic for you today. Our region is under a fire hazard right now as we are short on rainfall. Meantime, the National Weather Service predicts the Mississippi River will tie an all-time record low level this week, something being seen nationwide. Barges are getting stuck. So we turn to our panel, moral side of the news. Are you concerned about weather and its fallout?
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. I would say yes, especially with the river traffic. It seems to be that would be easier to more, how do you say, economically feasible than by overland and things of this nature. But if the rivers go as they have in Europe, sometimes the river traffic in Europe is dead because there's no water anymore and not enough water to maintain the boating, whatever. So yes, I'm very concerned about it. Not just with the rivers and whatever, but the whole thing of the environment. It's just we're beginning to finally see what was predicted happening, but it's happening at a more rapid pace than what was predicted. So
much more rapid. And I appreciate what you said, Tony. There's no question that barge traffic it really makes a difference. I mean, the warehouses, the extra warehouses, temporary storage things, people are complaining about supply chains. This is making it worse. There's no question. I mean, even at the big ports. And then, but this is, I hate it when people just focus on supply chain issues, like how it affects me. Really, what we're talking about here is massive climate change. And there are still climate deniers out there who want to, gut the EPA, and I won't go into all of it, but this is a much bigger issue. I know my brother was looking for a second home. He's a wealthy dude, and he wanted someplace that had a fresh water source, because he thinks, is my baby brother, and he thinks that that's, really going to be a problem. And I'm excited to say that they bought their place in Asheville. So sometimes he'll be nearby instead of out in California.
It concerns me because of the trickle down effect. If the water is receding, then how does that affect the creatures that need that source? And then where do they then go to find it in other places? And it just reminds us that this web is so delicate and it needs care. And the water receding is a message, I think.
If I may interject quickly, Pope Francis wrote an encyclical entitled Laudato Si. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he thinks the whole thing of it, the environment is such a gift, but it goes from the environment of nature, like you're talking about, Harriet, to the environment of humanity. And if we're on the one not supportive, we're not going to be supportive of the other. I'll just throw that in. If anybody's interested, go check that out. It's a good write.
Well, water is a basic staple of life.
You
We
better
can
believe
just
it,
end
yeah.
it right there. So right there, that should make it a cause for concern and a cause for some level of prevention to prevent it from creating further demise and an effect on human life.
Absolutely.
People have said that the next war, people have said for like 30 years, 20 years, depends on when you became aware of this, that the next wars in the Middle East would not be for oil, but for water. And when that sounds logical, but that was a time before anyone ever, at least to my knowledge, was thinking that that's going to be a problem in America. That's the desert. Of course, they're having water problems.
I hate to predict, but I think out west, you're going to see state vie with state for water, especially in Colorado.
Well, in times like this, I can trust the promise of the rainbow that it'll be fire next time. It won't be water. So I can trust that to be true by faith.
Panel, just a minute and a half left. I need your opinion. A show of hands of all of you who enjoy an occasional hot brown meal.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You know I do.
yes, my voice both.
Gaylia can't.
Not kosher in so many ways, mixing milk and meat and then putting pork on top.
Next week,
It's not my thing.
Many local restaurants will offer special hot browns next week. Will you partake, and are you ready to dig in? Everybody but Gaylia.
Oh, I'm not.
I'll
You can
dive
have
in.
mine, Tony.
I'll slide in.
Hey, listen, I get to it. Clay, you get Gaylia's, and I'll take Harriet's.
Yeah, I'll slide in on a hot brown any day.
All right, well, that's a good way to end, I guess, on our program, Moral Side of the News, our own version of the hot brown. Thank you to Harriett Akins-Banman, Gaylia Rooks, Clay Calloway, and Tony Smith. If you'd like to catch this program again, please do it. Moral Side of the News, just search for it on YouTube, and you'll find many, many episodes from the past year. Clay, thanks for joining us on the phone.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and have a great week. We'll be back again next week. So long. Moral Side of the News is now in its 70th year, making it one of America's longest-running public affairs programs. Thank you for making it part of your weekend.